I don't even know where to begin because let's do this. Let's talk about this DOJ antitrust suit. So I've got the story right here from Fox. Lawmakers hail DOJ antitrust lawsuit against Google as long overdue. Senator Hawley called it the most important antitrust case in a generation. Today's lawsuit is the most important in a generation, Senator Josh Hawley said. Google and its fellow big tech monopolists exercise unprecedented power over the lives of ordinary Americans, controlling everything from the news we read to the security of our most personal information. And Google in particular has gathered and maintained that power through illegal means. The DOJ suit alleges that Google has used its dominance in online search and advertising to stifle competition and boost profits. The suit could be an opening shot in a battle against a number of big tech companies in coming months. A Google spokesperson told Fox News, today's lawsuit by the Department of Justice is deeply flawed. People use Google because they choose to, not because they're forced to, or because they can't find alternatives. We have a fuller statement this morning. Later, the tech giant released a lengthy blog post in which it said the DOJ complaint relies on dubious antitrust arguments. This lawsuit would do nothing to help consumers. To the contrary, it would artificially prop up lower quality search alternatives, raise phone prices, and make it harder for people to get the search services they want to use. The lawsuit says, for years, Google has entered into exclusionary agreements, including tying arrangements and engaged in anti-competitive conduct to lock up distribution channels and block rivals. American consumers are forced to accept Google's policies, privacy practices, and use of personal data, and new companies with innovative business models cannot emerge from Google's long shadow. For the sake of American consumers, advertisers, and all companies now reliant on the internet economy, the time has come to stop Google's anti-competitive conduct and restore competition, it says. I think that was a whole lot of hot air, and it is the wrong target, and it's going to miss because I think Google makes a really good point. I don't use Bing. I don't want to use Bing. I do use DuckDuckGo sometimes, So there are choices when it comes to search. The issue with Google is they're more than just a search engine. And the DOJ lawsuit is very much focused on search and how they manipulate search. No, the issue is that YouTube, for instance, which we're on, is heavily subsidized by other areas of Google. Because of that, no other video platform can compete. And some argue no video platform could survive with how expensive it is to do streaming, to do this. I mean, I'll tell you guys, we're doing this show right now, cost me nothing. To press live on this stream so that all of you can watch, nothing. Google just says if we make money off it, we'll take a cut. So that can't exist on a lot of other platforms because it's really expensive, like podcasting, for instance. If I got anywhere near the amount of views on podcasting, it would be an insane amount of money to handle all that bandwidth. So anyway, let's dive into it. What do you think, Alan? You were telling me before you don't think this antitrust stuff is going to do anything.
Well, it's important, and it's good that the Republicans are punishing Google and being seen to punish Google, because I think the idea that a lot of tech companies have had for a long time is we don't have to listen to the warnings of Republicans about censorship because they're never going to regulate us. They're never going to do anything. So there's one positive thing to it. Also positive, the fact that we might actually get to see behind the curtain, see how Google is training its search algorithm. That's something we don't know about, really. We've got some idea of it based on whistleblowers I've talked to, based on James O'Keefe's whistleblowers as well. But if through the case we can get a look at that, that would be excellent. But I don't think antitrust focuses on the right thing. So it's true that Google is a monopoly. They control 90% of search worldwide. It's true that they're, pretty bad to competitors, not just search competitors, but as you said, competing video platforms, competing
email,
like reviewing as well.
Yeah.
So it'll be very good for companies like Yelp. But it doesn't really focus on, I think, the real problem of Google, which is its vast power over political information, its ability to swing elections, and its ability to destroy people's livelihoods. Like if you're a website, if you run a website and it goes from page 1 of Google to page 1,000, it's going to have a huge impact on your business. You're done. Yeah.
I knew a guy who did online sales, and Google one day changed the algorithm, and then his company didn't exist anymore.
Yeah. Well, look at what they've done to news publishers. So Breitbart News published a couple of months ago research showing they've cut visibility on Breitbart links by 99% compared to 2016. They've done it to a lot of other websites as well. Almost every conservative news website, with the exception of one or two like Fox, just colossal fall in visibility since 2016, and that's completely artificial because traffic numbers haven't gone down. It's just Google visibility that's gone down.
Right. My two main channels are blacklisted on Google. You can't search for them; they're gone. So maybe I'll reap some benefits from an antitrust thing where they separate all these companies or whatever. I don't know, but I kind of feel like I think Andrew Yang made this point. He was like, nobody wants to use Bing. Antitrust isn't the real issue. I guess kind of like what you're saying. But then when you have Google, Alphabet, I suppose now, controlling all of these different industries in one big massive corporation, maybe the issue isn't search. Maybe the issue is search needs to be separate from video, needs to be separate from email, needs to be separate from Google Drive and all that stuff.
If you really want competition among the search engines to give, smaller players like DuckDuckGo an advantage, one of the things one of my Google sources told me is that what you need to do is separate the data from the rest of Google and say the data is going to be available anonymized to competitors, because that's what gives Google its advantage. You take them away from the data, you make the data non-exclusive, and suddenly other search engines can compete. I
have a friend who's doing this big push for owning your own data. It's like a big movement, and if that were the case, then that could function. It could function that way. So if every bit of information that one of these companies might get from you, you own and can distribute freely as you choose, that's a really interesting idea, because then all these other companies can build better services based off of all this data anonymized.
Yeah, it's the basis of their market power. It's also the basis of their ability to politically manipulate people, which we can get into.
Actually, I guess in that regard, I would say their search is a monopoly, because they've created this system where it's an interesting phenomenon we're seeing with social media, Twitter, Facebook, and Google, where the only reason they're a monopoly, they dominate these spaces, is because no one uses anything else. And because no one uses anything else, there can be no competition. So it is challenging. I can't blame Twitter because everybody's on Twitter, but because everybody's on Twitter, no one uses anything else, and it's creating monopolistic problems. Right?
Yeah, there's an argument that these are natural monopolies because you want to go to a social network that has the most amount of people on it. That's where you'll get maximum viewership for your content. And with search, the advantage gets locked in once you have that amount of data, because once you have it, your competitors by definition don't have it. And Google's really mastered this. This is why they've gone into smartphones, they've gone into browsers, they've gone into laptops, because that's just more ways to gather data.
Man. This makes me think. So I think giving the data to the user is paramount. I agree with you guys. But I also think you have to free their software code, because if it's private code and they give you data, it could be false data and you wouldn't know. So the only way to verify that the data is real is if you understand what the code is measuring.
I don't necessarily agree. I mean, that would be them defrauding you.
Yes,
and defrauding the government.
Yeah, it would be.
And I just think if they commit a crime, you punish them for the crime.
But you wouldn't know they were committing a crime.
Well, the government would subpoena them to verify the records.
By showing their code?
Yeah, but they don't have to release the code to the public.
Show the code anyway. Well, I mean, the government is public.
Right. The idea is they can look at the code without revealing trade secrets. And so they can see if the data is verified or not. I don't think just a company giving up the property they develop makes sense. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, there needs to be a lot more transparency. What I would like to see, especially with regards to political manipulation, is how do they train their so-called hate speech algorithms and their disinformation algorithms? So when you're training an algorithm, the way you do it is you're training it to recognize language if you're trying to detect certain types of speech. And you'd have to train it on a set of data. This is hate speech, this isn't hate speech. That's what you're giving the algorithm. So I would love to see their list of examples that they've used to train these algorithms. That would be the way. That would be like the smoking. Well, we've had so many smoking guns already. It's kind of ridiculous to say it. But that would be yet another smoking gun that would conclusively prove political bias. Although, again, I say that the black-pilled reality is that we've had the smoking guns and nothing has been done about it.
There's like a pile of guns in the other room that are aflame. It's like they're sending smoke signals with the burning guns. Like, wow, look at all that smoke coming out. We know it. And then you've got, there's a reason why it's Republicans going after these companies and not Democrats. And the Democrats are stupid for it, don't get me wrong. But they're sitting there and they're just like, well, we're not getting banned, so let's roll with it. They're banning our opponents. But what it's really doing is creating this warped reality where conservatives look normal and the left looks psychotic. Like you get Antifa on Twitter saying, we're going to go burn it down. And a regular person's like, that's crazy. But the conservatives say anything kind of like that are nuked instantly. You see what I mean?
Well, I'll make 2 points about that. First of all, the Republican establishment, especially the ones in the Senate, are complete wusses. Many of them bought and paid for by Google. So we saw the New York Post get censored last week, and the Senate Republicans came out, we're going to subpoena Jack Dorsey. I think it was a day ago.
And then they voted it down or whatever, right?
Yeah. The Republicans wavered. We're not going to subpoena Jack Dorsey.
So
I'm being maybe too harsh. There are some senators who are very good on the issue, Hawley, Cruz, Blackburn, but like the vast majority of Republican senators, they can't be trusted on this issue either. But I will say the second point, the left supporting censorship. This is extremely naive. If you think these technologies that have been developed by Silicon Valley won't one day be turned against the left, the anti-war left especially,
Yep.
you're being very naive.
They're already getting nuked.
Already, yeah.
Yeah, so I remember when Veritas did that expose on Pinterest, something they didn't catch when they were talking about Live Action being censored, the pro-life organization. I looked at it and I was like, whoa, anti-media is on there. And they're like, anti-police brutality, anti-war, progressive left, anti-establishment. They're getting censored. Why would an anti-war leftist organization be censored? Isn't that weird? I think it's because it's not so much about the conservatives when they're doing censorship. It's about the people who oppose the establishment. And when, like you said in your book, they're trying to, what are they doing? They're stopping the Trump movement.
Yep.
The Trump movement is anti-establishment. Trump booted out the crony rhinos and took over the Republican Party. So what's really happening is the censorship is against those who dare challenge the establishment, and that includes anti-war left, and that includes, for the most part, the larger group, the conservatives, those who supported Trump.
So most of the book is based on stuff from Silicon Valley sources. But by the way, if you want to get it, it's called Deleted, and you can find it at deletedbook.com. But there's one source I talked to from the government, and he's been following the censorship issue for a long time. And the way he put it, I think, was very chilling. He said, up until 2015, 2016, Western establishment elites saw internet free speech as a good thing because it helped them regime change and destabilize countries abroad. That was, Twitter, the Arab Spring, Eastern Europe as well, color revolutions. But, he said, as soon as you had Brexit, as soon as you had Donald Trump, establishment elites realized, oh no, this technology can be used to regime change us. That's the mentality now.
You know what I love? During the Arab Spring, I had a bunch of friends who were activists who were trying to provide communications. And then one day my friend was like, I just noticed something. You notice all these Libyan revolutionary people speak perfect colloquial English? And I started laughing. I was like, that's an interesting thing, right? And they're like, that's really weird. And then they try and justify it saying, well, it makes sense because Twitter is a very Western thing. So only people educated in the West or who are Western would be using it. And some other people were like, I don't know, maybe they're just trying to convince people who use the platform in America that Libyans want us to intervene. And then we did. And Hillary Clinton said, we came, we saw, he died. I'm not insinuating anything. I'm just saying what people were talking about at the time. I don't know. But it is. Do you know about Barrett Brown's investigation, Project PM?
No, enlighten me.
This was a long time ago. He ended up going, I think, I could be getting the details wrong, but I think he went to prison partly because of it, because they were doing, they were reviewing Stratfor data. So this is strategic forensics. I guess it's like.
Oh, I do remember this.
Yes.
The big Stratfor thing. Yeah,
Yep.
I do remember this.
And so in it, we learned that I think the U.S. Air Force was purchasing sock puppet accounts. A sock puppet account is a dummy. It's a bot. It's what they say, bots. It's an account with a fake picture and a fake name, and then one person controls 50 of them. They're called sock puppets to create the perception of popular opinion. This is one of the biggest problems that's affecting big corporations today. Like Pepsi will put out a commercial and it's like a guy drinking, and throwing a football, and they'll get inundated with like 50 to 100 messages on Twitter saying you're racist. And then all of a sudden they're like, we're being attacked. What do we do? Quick, issue an apology. And it's like, dude, it's one guy with 50 accounts. So we learned this back in 2011. I think it was 2012 that U.S. military was buying sock puppet accounts. For what purpose? Middle Eastern intelligence operations and persuasion, psychological operations and things like that. So this has been an ongoing thing. And at some point, you had the political parties realize they can do it. And I got to be honest, I think the Democrats figured it out way before the Republicans.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah,
no doubt.
Definitely. They were using Facebook and all that stuff first. I mean, Act Blue, which you're familiar with. Act Blue is the progressive, fundraising. It's a progressive GoFundMe, essentially. And then Republicans only launched Win Red recently. And that's the Republican version of it. So the Democrats have been on the forefront of this. But something weird happened in the Trump era, like in the 2015 with the Trump army, the Trump train, the meme smiths. All of a sudden you had an organic explosion of people who were actively producing content and propping up Trump, something that they couldn't pay for,
Yep, and you hit the nail on the head. This is stuff the Obama campaign was doing in 2012. Cambridge Analytica was just a smaller scale version of what Obama was doing in 2012 with Facebook's help. And it was an Obama campaign, pretty senior Obama campaign person who revealed that, who was working directly on it. She said that Facebook actually helped them and gave them assistance in 2012. Her name was Carol something. I'm blanking on her last name. Carol Peterson, perhaps. But also with the bots. the bots you mentioned from Stratfor.
Or sock puppets.
The reason there was this panic after Trump's win was because all of these people, the foreign policy establishment, have been doing this for years. They started accusing everyone else of, using bots and sock puppets and disinformation. Of course, they were terrified that that would happen to them because they'd be doing it for so long. So they couldn't imagine that this movement might actually be organic, might actually be real people. They thought it was just the same thing they'd been doing for years and years.
But then they started pushing that fake Russia narrative, claiming that it was Russia doing all of this, and it just wasn't.
It probably was like a kid in Russia in an apartment, and they traced some IP, and they got like one. And they were like, oh, the Russians, it's the government, the Russian government. You're like, well, actually, it was just some dude who maybe had a Russian IP.
Well, the story now, I guess, is that it's just such a weird and complicated conspiracy of nonsense. That who was it? Was it Ratcliffe who issued the statement basically saying that Hillary Clinton created the Russian intelligence believed that Hillary Clinton was going to create a fake campaign accusing Trump of working with them to get the public, to get the press cycle off of her email story, and that Obama was briefed on this, so they knew. At least the insinuation is Hillary Clinton created the fake idea just out of the blue.
It seemed like it came right after her email scandal dropped.
And she just started saying it. She's like, Trump's working with Russia. And it's like,
It was
this
so
is
heavy-handed.
stupidest thing.
Yeah.
And you know who it convinced? It convinced, or maybe they were in on it, I don't know, but all these well-funded foreign policy NGOs that are European NGOs, American NGOs. Just a few days ago, we published a story at Breitbart News about the German Marshall Fund. This is one of these extremely well-funded foreign policy NGOs, very focused on Russia, very focused on the Balkans. They're the ones who have been pushing the disinformation narrative, the Russian disinformation narrative, for 4 years now, and pressuring the tech companies to censor what they call disinformation. Another one of those groups, the Atlantic Council, working directly with Facebook. And this other one, the German Marshall Fund, they've actually said that Breitbart News, Fox News, The Blaze, basically every conservative news website needs to be suppressed by Facebook. They need to apply friction because, in the words of this think tank, which, by the way, is funded by the US government and foreign governments and the German government, sounds like foreign interference to me, I don't know how that word's defined these days, but they said Facebook has to apply friction, which is their word for suppression of all these so-called deceptive news sites.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. We do the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. So come back to check us out when we go live. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and we are also available on all podcast platforms for free if you want to listen to us there. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you all next time.